Audrey Butler. I am a nutritionist by trade, and so I've learned this just as part of wanting to save food in a more nutritious way and eat it, have more probiotics in our diet. But to be honest, I need to give credit to my mom because she's done a lot of these things before I have. In fact, my kombucha starter is from her. She did that a long time. Hello, come in, welcome.
There's a thingy back there.
And I don't know if any of you know my brother Andrew Skousen, but he does a lot of these things too, and he's the one who taught me to do sauerkraut. So a lot of it is family. I can't take credit for it all. And I'm going to give you a disclaimer. I do not do this on a professional level at all. I do it in the fastest, easiest, dirtiest way that I can possibly get away with because I don't want to spend a lot of time doing it. I want to have it and I want to have it done, and if I can do it, any of you can do it. As long as you're willing to fail sometimes, because ferments are a little bit unpredictable. They're a wild living thing, and sometimes they work better than others. And I've come across a few things that have helped make it more predictable, and I'll share those with you tonight. But if you fail, please don't quit. Just keep trying. And we'll talk about some of the key things that you need to have in place that will really make it likely that you will succeed. Fair enough?
Yes.
Okay, let's do that. So hopefully you all got a handout here. And I have other recipes up here, but I didn't know how many to print, so I didn't print my recipes. You can come up and take pictures of them with your phone, or you can give me your email and I'll be happy to email them to you. So those are your options for the pickles recipe, the cranberry chutney, and the cultured sauerkraut. And then I did do the kombucha and the milk kefir on your handout there. So let's just talk about why would we even want to do this. What are the benefits of fermenting vegetables? You can either cheat on your handout or just tell me what you already know.
Well, they've been doing it for a long time because you don't need refrigeration.
That's right. So it's a great method of preservation. Yeah. What else?
Probiotics.
Probiotics. Yeah, exactly. So that's what it's the salt mixed with the friendly bacteria in the vegetables and the culture that you use, and they combine. The friendly bacteria eats the sugars that are in the vegetables and creates lactic acid as a byproduct, so they'll taste sour even though there's no vinegar in them. So the pickles and the sauerkraut, they are legitimately sour with zero vinegar. So if you were in a survival situation and you didn't have vinegar to make pickles or some of the other things, you don't need it. You just need salt and water and your vegetables. If you're using organic vegetables, most of them have a good amount of friendly bacteria on their surface just naturally as they grow. I get better results if I also use a cultured starter. But it's called wild fermentation when you don't. Cabbage especially is very easy to do as a wild ferment. It's got lots of lactobacillus naturally growing on it. And so you really don't need a culture to do wild sauerkraut.
Question.
Yes.
So you were mentioning cucumbers being fresh enough. So you get a cabbage and you don't know how fresh it is from the grocery store, and you know it sits out for a few days and it's kind of getting wilty.
Cabbage is really resilient because it's a low water content vegetable. You can ferment cabbage that has been sitting in your cold storage for months. It'll be fine. You can get it at the store and let it sit in your fridge for a week or two, and it'll still ferment just fine. Cucumbers are tricky because they're a really high content water thing, and they will go mushy if they're not fresh enough and you don't use enough salt. And because of the high water content, they need more salt in their brine than sauerkraut does. And we'll talk a little bit about that. In fact, those are some of your key tips to making sure you have a good ferment. You need fresh vegetables, especially the higher water content. You need them to be organic, especially if you're not going to use a culture. You need to use the right amount of salt. And the other one, you just need to make sure they are covered with water. You need to make sure everything stays underwater. Otherwise, it will go moldy. Welcome, you guys. Come on in. I'm so glad you made it. Oh, good job on finding the handouts. Grab a handout as you come in. So let's just look and make sure we covered everything. So fermented foods preserve. It's a great way to preserve our food. It also pre-digests their food. We're not going to talk about it tonight, but how many people make sourdough bread?
Oh,
Do we have any sourdough bread bakers here?
Yeah.
Yeah? One of the benefits of using a sourdough and fermenting it and using that wild yeast is it pre-digests the proteins, especially gluten, in the food. And it also kind of does it with our vegetables. It breaks it down, so it's kind of in between raw and cooked, but it's not cooked at all. Everything is still fresh, so all the enzymes are still there, all your vitamins are still there, and in fact, during the fermentation process, those friendly microbes are going to release and make more vitamins. So it's actually more nutritious in a fermented state than it is just eating it raw. Compare that with canning, which pretty much kills a lot of your vitamins that are heat sensitive.
So I know they sell sauerkraut in a pouch in the produce section. I've never bought it,
Okay,
but can you, I know it lasts a long time in the fridge after you make it and it's done fermenting, but can you freeze it? Can you freeze dry it? Are these protected ways to save your probiotics?
so freezing will make a lot of them go dormant and may kill some of them. Some of them may survive depending on the strain that's in there.
So freeze drying too.
Freeze drying is probably too cold for most of them to survive. I would not recommend you freeze dry. And
I've
really,
heard that they freeze dry certain starters, sourdough starters and things, and so I didn't know.
you know what? I don't actually know the answer, and I think the answer would be strain specific.
Okay.
So you would have to know that the specific probiotic strain that you were using could withstand those temperatures.
But you can't test your sauerkraut to see what strain you have.
No.
I mean, there's millions of strains.
Right. Yeah.
So-
I mean, technically you could take it to a lab and have them test it, and they would figure it out for you. But a wild ferment with vegetables, you're going to get a variety of different strains. Even when you add a store-bought culture, you would get the culture strain and whatever else was on the vegetables also. And that's good because we want variety. Variety is good for the most part. Now, sometimes your culture strain will outcompete some of the other ones, so that's another thing too, is whichever one is the strongest and eats the food the fastest is going to grow the fastest, and it might outcompete. So yes, you're absolutely right. Which is important to know, for example, if you have some gut dysbiosis, you're having some really severe gastrointestinal issues and you're trying to heal your gut and heal from an imbalance in your gut, you don't want to use wild ferments as your probiotics to try to heal your gut. In fact, several gut health experts say if you're trying to heal your gut, that is not the time to use your wild ferments. You want to use specific probiotic strains made in a lab that are scientifically tested to benefit the specific kind of healing that you want. So
is it just because they're like you can't specify what it is, or is it too strong, or why would you not want to use the wild ferment?
well, a couple of reasons. Hey, Charlene, welcome. Couple of reasons is, first of all, you need to know that even though these have probiotics in them, and the probiotics create this lactic acid, which makes this nice acidic food that helps beneficial bacteria grow, and then it keeps some of the pathogenic bacteria in lower concentrations in our stomach and our gut. This does not actually plant itself in our gut and start to grow. None of this will stay in your gut longer than a couple of days after you eat it. So this is not contributing to the microbiome of your gut or your overall garden, I like to think of it, of bacteria. It's something that comes and goes. So even though that is a benefit, it's actually the smallest benefit. Preserving your foods in a way that increases the nutrient content and the enzymes and helps make it digestible and makes your food itself more nutritious, and will store it in a cold, it needs to be refrigerated or in a cold storage, but it will last over the winter. So it definitely prolongs its shelf life in the most nutrient dense way. The second only next to this is freeze drying as far as retaining your nutrients. So fermented foods are the top, freeze drying is the second, and then you've got your freezing after that, and then canning is the least amount of nutrient preservation. Canning still has its benefits. It's still got a lot of macronutrients like carbohydrates and fiber. Yes?
This is different than pickling, right?
So
Fermenting and
traditional
pickling.
pickling uses vinegar, right? Vinegar and salt. This one does not use any vinegar. We're using the bacteria to create lactic acid instead of vinegar. So that's a very key distinction. And in fact, going back to buying sauerkraut at the store, you can tell whether a sauerkraut has been fermented or pickled just by looking at the ingredients. If it has vinegar as a main ingredient, then it's pickled. If it just lists salt and water, and then it has, especially if it says live cultures on it, then you know that it's a fermented or a cultured product. Bubby's is the most well-known and delicious brand. I wish I could make my things taste as good as Bubby's, but I haven't quite gotten to that level yet, probably because they use professional level equipment and grades and controls and things like that. And those of you who walked in, my disclaimer was, I am not nearly professional. I do the minimum amount of work to make it function, but I really am not fussy about it. I really want to just get the benefits with the minimum amount of fuss. But you can, for example, buy a bottle of Bubby's and use the juice to culture your pickles or your sauerkraut and get this probiotic strains that they use, and that actually works pretty well.
So what is Buddies?
Bubby's is a brand that makes fermented pickles and sauerkraut.
Costco usually has them.
Costco does not carry their fermented brands. The Bubby's pickles at Costco are sweet and sour pickles, and they are made with vinegar, not fermented. And they have a different brand of sauerkraut than Bubby's, which is also excellent. Feel free to buy it. It's great. You can even use the juice for that to put it in your
So
own
where is
homemade batch.
Bubby's gotten?
Mostly Good Earth or Natural Grocers or does Azure Standard sell it? Ooh, very cool. Very cool.
Do we have an Azure group that gets deliveries?
Yeah, we do. You should talk to Charlene after. So yes, the other thing I wanted to mention is the probiotics, or friendly bacteria that we get on fruits and vegetables are different than what grows in our gut. When they compare the list of probiotics that are found in kefir and yogurt and wild ferments, there's very little crossover to the main probiotics that live in our gut. They're very different conditions. Our gut doesn't have oxygen and it doesn't have sunlight, whereas fruits and vegetables do. And like I said, it doesn't mean that there's some benefits, but that's one of the main reasons they don't grow in our gut. We can't just eat it and like we're eating seeds that get planted in our underground, dark, airless garden. and expect them to grow, right? But they do give us, like I said, nutrition, and the lactic acid is a little bit more beneficial for our body than a ton of vinegar. Any questions on that? So it's super helpful, but like I said, it's not going to recolonize your gut with the right things you want after taking antibiotics or other things. You'd want to go with more professional grain strains to do that effectively. All right, let's see. I think we've talked about all the benefits. Let's talk about some of the essential equipment. So, like I said, number one, you need salt, so a good quality salt. Redmond real salt, Celtic salt, a kosher salt. Pink salt, if you know it's not contaminated with heavy metals. There's a little bit of controversy there. Some people say they've tested Costco's Himalayan pink salt and found it higher in heavy metals.
I get mine in bulk from Winco, and there's not a lot of information there.
Right.
That can be illegal.
So it can be, I know from Pakistan, it's a little sketchy.
Do you know about Redmond salt?
Redmond salt is very clean.
Okay.
Yeah, so I do like Redmond salt. But even buying just a pickling salt, it may not have as many minerals, but it does do well as far as creating your product. The other thing that's essential is keeping your vegetables under water, right? We've got to keep them under. And in order to do that, you really need some kind of weight. And you can jury rig all kinds of weights if you want, but honestly, just buy a glass weight, some glass fermentation weights. Look on Amazon, there's lots of different versions. Make sure they're lead-free, of course. I got the Year of Plenty brand. It came in a pack of 4, about this size, that fits down in the jars, and it's got a little handle to be able to reach in and get it out. With some of my bigger jars, I have to use 2 at a time, but you've got to keep your vegetables under the water because anything that's above the water tends to go moldy. So that's a really key piece of equipment. I really like these jars. These are the Bormioli Rocco Fido jars. We just call them Fido jars. How many of you have these or have used these? So they're really nice because they are spring-loaded, which means as the gas is built up, as the bacteria creates lactic acid, it creates some bubbles and gas, and these jars just let it burp naturally so that they don't build up too much pressure and explode your jars, but they're also letting all the gases out, which means oxygen is not coming in, and they're way less likely to mold. Yeah.
Do they not have a rubber ring?
They do, yeah.
Oh,
There's a
and they
rubber ring
work
inside,
too?
yeah.
And what are they called again?
They're called Fido jars. If you look on your handout under a jar big enough to hold your vegetables, I put the brand that
Oh,
you want to.
Fido,
You
okay.
can get them on Amazon or direct from their website. There's
Okay.
lots of kitchen wholesalers, retailers, that sell them as well. So just shop around and find the best deal. But those definitely have made my fails happen less often using those jars. But sometimes I'll just use a loose fitting lid. You just don't screw it on too tight, and that way the gases can kind of escape. So,
Where do you get your chlorine-free water?
well, we're in Spring City.
Yeah,
And I have a well, so
Okay, because there is chlorine in our culinary water sometimes.
yes.
So-
if
But
you're
it's
on
also
city
very
water-
small compared to others.
If you're on city water, you should leave it out or something. The chlorine
Filter
will
it,
dissipate.
yeah, use
Or can you
filtered
just let
water.
it sit out for a few days too and it'll
Yep,
evaporate?
that works too. You can let the chlorine evaporate off.
And of course, there's no chlorine in the one at the little fountain by the gas
Yep,
station.
that too, yeah. My understanding was they only chlorinate Spring City's water if their test shows that they need to.
Right, if there's total coliform, that they feel.
Right.
But they still have to do it every so often. I don't know what the story is now.
That's good to know.
That-
So you
what
can't
didn't-
always trust. that the Spring City
Exactly,
water
that's why
is
maybe the
chlorine-free.
spring water.
Yeah.
That's,
When they do it, do they put it on a website or something so you know that chlorinated or?
probably not, I don't know.
On the post office store.
Right, that's where we get all our information, right?
Funerals and water, yeah.
And you probably can smell it when they do with that. Have you
Some people
experienced
can.
that? I think they try to use the lowest dose they possibly can. So yeah, that's something to take into account, absolutely. All right, we talked about,
You have a kitchen scale on here.
yep, and I didn't bring mine, but the reason is because to get the most accurate amount of salt, using a scale is the best, both to weigh your vegetables, and we'll get into this, to weigh your vegetables, and your salt, because different salt has different weights depending on how big the grain is, where it's mined, you know, you kind of need to figure out how much your salt weighs. And once you do, for example, I weighed my Redmond salt and found a tablespoon was about 16 grams. So that can kind of help if I'm feeling like just using a tablespoon. But just know that using a tablespoon measuring cup is not going to be as accurate, but it can get close. It doesn't have to be super accurate. It's really the difference between a tablespoon and a half a tablespoon versus, you know, a few more grains to make up a couple of grams. Yes, you had a question.
Can you go to Redmond? Do they have a store there where the mine is and buyers?
I've never been there. I don't know. Does anybody know?
They do, I've been to it.
Okay, so they do have a
You
store.
can buy like a 100-pound bag, right? No shipping and.
I get it online, but.
Yep, you can also get it online, but Horseshoe Mountain Hardware sells it, and in the fall they had it on a really good 15% off sale, which was, I think I saved at least $15 on the big 25-pound bag. And then the Manti Prep group email that just went out, someone's doing a group buy and they're including Redmond salt for about that sale price as well. So, but in a pinch, Horseshoe Mountain is an easy place to go buy it. And they sell it in various sizes. The cheapest, obviously, is to get the big 25-pound bag and buy your 2-year supply all at once or something. Good question. Okay. I think we've talked about all the different, any questions on essential equipment? One of the things I haven't bought, but I'm considering, is they have these little silicone jar size lids that go in that will also kind of help cover and keep things underwater. So you could put those down and then put the weight on top of it. Because obviously in a jar like this, it's not going to keep it down. In the sauerkraut, you can also use
Or just another leaf, can't you?
another leaf, yep, and put that down and then put the weight on top of that, and that helps as well. And then after a while, the leaf might go moldy, and so you can take it out, but then usually the water has seeped out of the cabbage enough that the level has risen. You can just kind of play with that. I actually had some of those silicone bowl covers that just kind of stretch and go over, and so I tried putting one of those in and then the weight on top, and that worked really great. But the lactic acid leached the color out of them, so my blue covers turned out to be white. Hopefully that color was food grade.
I was gonna say, did it stain your food at all?
No, it just,
You were
I
blue the
think
next
they
day.
ate it, yeah.
The last thing I read was that you fill a Ziploc with water. You put a little baggie with water on it.
Yep, that's an option too.
Yeah. Microplastics, I don't know.
Right,
but at least
yeah,
it's
I
not
don't
hot,
love
right?
plastic. And the tricky thing is getting it to fill the space. That's really why, what gets tricky, is getting it to fill the space. Pickles are easy. I only do whole cucumbers. I've not been able to do sliced very well. Maybe I didn't use enough salt when I did it, but the whole ones are easier to weight down and stack in a way that they don't float up. Okay, let's talk about how much salt to use. So, if you want to get really technical, I highly recommend you follow this link. And that website has a very specific table, like which vegetables need how much salt. And she's even created a little calculator where you can put in what vegetable you're using and how much water, and it'll tell you exactly how much salt to use. So if you really want to be super accurate, then and you're doing something different than what I'm talking about today. So for sauerkraut, you need about 2% salt solution. The pickles, because they have much higher water content and thinner skin, they need 3 to 5% salt. So you need way more salt to do pickles than you do sauerkraut. So that's the first thing to know. And green beans are a little bit closer to sauerkraut, right? They're not really high in the water content. So they're around 2.5% for green beans as well. And there's 2 different ways to do it. You can do a brine. So I do a brine where I mix the salt with the water for the pickles. But for the sauerkraut, it works better to chop it up, sprinkle the salt in, mix it around, and let it sit. And the salt will pull the water out of the cabbage and help make a little brine on its way. So if you look here, I've got a different calculation for how much salt to use if you're chopping your cabbage first, where you use the weight of how much vegetables you have and use the right amount of salt for the amount of vegetable. And then the one above that is how to do it if you're mixing it with water. So salt with your water. The really basic rough way is for sauerkraut, you're doing about, well, you really need to weigh your cabbage because there's just cabbages are different sizes. You just need to weigh how much cabbage you have and decide how much salt. But if I'm doing a brine, the basic thing is 1.5 to 2 tablespoons of salt to 2 cups of water. That's the really rough way.
What happens if you use too much salt?
So too much salt will kind of paralyze the friendly bacteria so they can't really do the ferment as well. It'll take a lot longer and your things will taste salty. If you have the right amount of salt, one of the ways you know that it's done is it will taste tangy instead of salty after it's really been fermenting long enough. But it'll take, if you have a ferment and it's taking way longer than you expect it to, and it's really still tasting salty and not tangy, then you know you put too much salt in it. If things end up really mushy and they don't taste, like the taste doesn't pop, then you probably didn't have enough salt.
And there's no way to go back and fix it after the fact. You're just like, that was a failed batch. Or can you fix it and adjust it?
Well, like this batch of sauerkraut, I don't think I put enough salt in. After I got done, I was like, this is just not tasting. But it's still, the texture was okay. So it had enough salt to have the texture I wanted, but not the flavor. So I did add a little bit more salt.
Did it improve it or don't you know yet?
I thought it improved it flavor-wise, but the texture was okay. If the texture was mushy, I would have just given it to the pigs or the chickens.
So if you've added too much salt, you can't, in theory, add more water.
No,
dilute it
if you
down.
add too much,
It's just done.
You're not even gonna know until a week or 2 has passed, and you're like, oh, this just
Okay.
did not turn out, and so
Again, chickens and pigs.
right, or compost.
Chickens.
Your
Chickens
compost
don't-
will love it, right?
How long does it usually take to become fermented?
It depends on the temperature. If it's the hot summer, it can be done in 5 days. If it's cooler, in the high 60s or low 70, 71, then it's going to take a week to a week and a half. So you kind of have to check it after 5 days and see where it's at. Other clues you can use is the brine will start turning cloudy. You can see some of these have gotten cloudy. They'll also be really nice and bubbly. they'll be bubbling and foaming and be cloudy. So that helps you know that you've got a good amount of salt and things are going well. These pickles are about halfway done. You can see they're still bright green. These pickles are all the way done. So you can see I've got a really nice cloudy brine, and the pickles are a really dark green instead of a bright green. So those are some of the clues, but really you just kind of taste it. Yes?
Can you reuse your brine? Like, you have almost no pickles there. Could you,
Right.
when you're done, could you just add more pickles to that jar, or can it be a start, or?
So you can use it to culture your next batch, but you don't want to use more than 1/4 cup of old brine. And the reason is the salt has already gone through the chemical reaction and reacted with the vegetables. So you would have to recalculate how much salt you would need, and that's almost impossible to do. So no, don't just reuse straight brine. You can use a tablespoon to 1/4 cup just to culture the next batch. But other than that, just drink it. Who has ever heard of drinking pickle juice for electrolytes? Like, this is full of salt and lactic acid. It's an amazing electrolyte.
It's
It's
good
an
when you're nauseous or sick.
There you go. Yeah. Or you've been working out in the garden or playing sports and you're hot. And I also like to use it in my salad dressings. It makes a great thing instead of vinegar for salad dressings or in a homemade ranch dressing. If you kind of want a dill flavored dip, then you can use it if you need to add some more liquid to your dressings. So there's other ways to use it. You don't need to toss it, but don't reuse it. Super great question.
I'm surprised to learn that certain jars allow gases to escape. I certainly missed something.
Yeah, so that's one of these. Because it's on a spring, it's got a little bit of give. So when gases apply pressure, it lets up just enough. And I forgot to bring my kombucha jars with the lid. There's kombucha lids that will do the same thing. So you can put them on really tightly and they won't explode because they're letting the gas.
So when you put the clip down, that's not so tight that it can't.
Right. Yeah, because it's a spring-loaded clip, is my understanding. Yes.
2 things, any spring-loaded jar, or this is a brand name and this is the brand we should be looking for?
If it's another spring-loaded jar that is advertised for fermentation,
Okay.
go for it. This one I know is tried and true. It's also really thick, strong glass. You still want to make sure you're putting your ferments in a strong jar if you're going to close a lid fairly tightly. For example, these are just normal jars that I've reused from regular pickles or bubby pickles. And this one I moved out of here to store in the fridge. But if I'm using one of these, I don't close the lid tightly. So you're letting air out.
My other question, is kombucha alcoholic?
It does have a very tiny amount of alcohol in it.
Oh.
But it's very, very small unless you just let it go. But honestly, it turns to vinegar more, like if I let it go really long and it eats up all the sugar in it, it just turns to a really strong vinegar rather than to an alcohol.
Okay.
And different kombuchas have different amounts, but it is a trace amount.
Does chlorine inhibit the fermentation?
Yes, that's why you don't want chlorine in your water, because it's an antimicrobial, right? They put it in there to kill bacteria, and we don't want it to kill a good bacteria. Yeah, good questions.
So I like sauerkraut, but I sort of learned that the hot dogs aren't that good for you.
Oh, well, you just have to buy a better hot dog. There's some that are better than others, but
Sauerkraut's good on pizza.
oh, interesting. What kind of pizza?
I like it on pepperoni.
Yeah?
It's kind of greasy. I take the grease off if I can, but if I eat too much, it gives me a headache. But the sauerkraut cuts through that like
So for people in the video, she's saying she likes to put sauerkraut on her pepperoni pizza. yeah, that would add a really nice tang to it, and she says she doesn't get headaches too, so that's good. Yeah, sauerkraut I like to put with a lot of things, just as a side dish with almost anything. And the pickles, if my kids don't like sauerkraut, usually they'll go for the pickles. So the pickles are kind of the gateway vegetable to fermented foods.
Do you rotate out like red cabbage versus green cabbage?
Yeah, you can totally do. Red cabbage is a little bit stiffer. It has a little lower water content, so you'll want to cut it extra thin, and you may have to ferment it a little bit longer. It's kind of fun. You can shred carrots really finely and add it to your sauerkraut. You could do a mix of red and white cabbage. There's all kinds of things. You can play around with different flavors. You can make it hot. You can add fennel or daikon radish. You can do a lot of things. If you look on the internet, you can find all kinds of fancy sauerkraut. This is me doing the minimal amount of work, so I keep it basic. Plus, my kids like it basic as well. Maybe someday we'll get fancy, but I just keep it what works, what's easy. And if you guys want to experiment, please do. There's lots of recipes online now. Let's see, which recipe should we do first? We'll kind of walk through some of these. Let's give you a vote. Give me a shout out. What do you want to hear about
What's in
first?
the red?
Okay, so this is my festive cranberry chutney. So this is my fermented version of cranberry sauce that I make for Christmas and Thanksgiving. And what it has in it is fresh cranberries, a whole orange, the juice and zest of 1 lemon, some fresh ginger, some fresh or frozen pineapple, a green apple, and if you really want to add, you can add some raisins or some pecans or walnuts. Those are really good too. And then I add cinnamon, cloves, and whatever I'm using to culture it with. And then some honey or maple syrup to sweeten it too, to taste. And
So you
Yes,
find
ma'am.
your cultures here at this website?
Cultures for Health is one of the most reputable places. There's a couple of other ones too, and you're welcome to do your research and try some, but Cultures for Health is like tried and true.
Does this take the same culture? I mean, is there one culture that does a whole bunch of different things, or specifically for fruit, specifically for vegetables?
Fruits and
Obviously, these are
vegetables, you can pretty much use the same things. I did buy a special culture when I wanted to try making my own creme fraiche sour cream. That takes a different culture. Kefir, milk kefir takes a different culture. Water kefir or coconut kefir takes a different culture. Kombucha is its own separate thing with the SCOBY. So
we can get all those to get started.
yeah, Cultures for Health has a variety, of all of those. And we'll try this a little bit. I just made it last night. Here's the thing with fruit. If you let it go more than 48 hours, you will get wine in your fruit. Like, it ferments very quickly, so you don't want to let it go more than 2 days. It's a very different ferment. You just barely let it start, and then you stick it in the fridge.
Is that because of the sugars in it?
Yes, yeah. The bacteria turns the sugars to alcohol very quickly. But that one's really fun, and I love it in the winter because with the fresh ginger in it and all of those citrus fruit, it's really high in vitamin C. It's really high in all of these anti-inflammatory spices and vegetables. So it's just a really great immune booster, and it tastes really good.
How do you eat it? I mean, do you serve it with certain things or?
So, yeah, you could definitely serve it any way you would do a regular cranberry relish, like put it on top of your turkey or your ham. I also put it on top of waffles, or mix it in with cottage cheese or yogurt, or I put 2 scoops on my plate and eat it plain. So you could eat it, just experiment whatever you like, but those are the main ways we do it. I feel like the fermented vegetables really help us digest our proteins, especially having some fermented vegetables like a sauerkraut and a brat, or a cranberry relish with some ham or turkey. The enzymes and the fiber and everything, and even the acid. Our proteins need acid in our stomach to digest, and a lot of us, especially as we age, don't have enough acid in our stomach. And so I think it really helps us digest meat, especially when you combine it with that. All right. So let's talk about pickles. Some tips for pickles. So you guys, I did not want to print out a ton of recipes because I had no idea how many people would be here. So you can all have copies of the recipes if you want. You can come up and take pictures of them, or if you want to give me your email, I'd be happy to email you them if you want a PDF version. So don't feel like you have to miss out on the recipes. So a couple of key things for pickles. Like I said, I like to keep them whole. I like to use them as fresh as possible. So try to, within 24 hours if you can, fresh from the garden, that's fine. If you buy the mini cucumbers at the store, buy the organic ones, and you can look at them. If they are wrinkly or old at all, don't even attempt it. But if they look fresh, they're usually okay as long as you use enough salt in your brine if you're trying to make some pickles during the winter. But keeping them fresh, I do like to snip off the blossom ends on my fresh garden cucumbers. Supposedly there's some enzymes they excrete that make it more likely your pickles will be mushy, so I snip those off. Using grape leaves. Grape leaves have tannic acid in them. That can help keep your pickles firm, especially if you're making a ton of them and you want them to last in your cold storage or your fridge for 4 or 5 months. Then definitely use the grape leaves. If you're just going to eat them up fresh, you're going to make them and you're going to eat them up within the next month, then I don't think you need the grape leaves. As long as you're using enough salt, I find my pickles are plenty crisp enough.
You said you don't cut yours. Is that because they get mushy?
Yeah, they just get mushy, and maybe they say 3 to 5% salt in your brine, and maybe, I haven't experimented this, but I'm thinking that if you're gonna slice them, maybe you need to do the 5% or 4%, whereas the whole you can get away with 3 or 4. So you might just have to up the salt if you're gonna slice them. Okay, so here's the other really important part of the pickles that I do differently, is I kept having the worst time with my pickles growing mold on the top because my pickles were whole and they were staying under the brine, but all the dill and the other spices I was using were floating to the top and those were going moldy, and I was just having such a hard time getting all those little tiny dill pieces under the water. So what I discovered that works really well is when you make the brine, you make a dill tea. So you heat up your water and then you put all your dill in the water and you make a tea. If you want hot pickles, we like hot pickles. We put some red pepper flakes in them, anything that's small. If you want to use the pickle mix of different spices that they use to make those pickling, kind of the sweet pickle flavors, make it into a tea. Let it steep for about 10 minutes in hot water. Put your salt in there, let everything dissolve, and then strain it. So that your actual brine, it's got the dill flavoring in it, but you don't have any of those herbs to float to the top and go moldy.
Did you think of this yourself?
Yes, I did. And I bet other people have done it too. But that's what I figured out for me, and it's worked beautifully. So anytime I did it with my dilly beans as well, anytime I want extra flavors that I know are going to float from the top, I make the brine with it. With the sauerkraut, you can mix things in and it's okay because it's a little bit different thing anyway. You got all these little pieces of cabbage you have to deal with as it is. But so that's my secret to keeping my pickles from going moldy. Speaking of mold, there is a difference between mold and con yeast that grows on fermented vegetables. So the con mold will be fuzzy and green or black, right? You all know what mold looks like. But oftentimes, especially if the weather's a little warmer and maybe you got the salt just barely high enough, then you'll get this white yeast that will grow on the top of your water. It's perfectly harmless. It is okay to eat. It doesn't affect your thing. You can just kind of spoon it off and maybe rinse off your vegetables if it's got some of that white con yeast on it. But they're perfectly fine to eat if that does happen to grow. And it does, I get it more in the summer when the temperatures are a little bit warmer. But if you get actual mold, you need to toss it because the mold gets throughout the whole thing. So if you can.
Is the SCOBY from the kombucha kind of like that yeast?
Yeah, it
Is that
reflects
kind of
okay.
a filmy?
No, and we'll look at it when we get to kombucha, but the SCOBY is a totally different organism. The con yeast is white and is very thin, and it just floats on the top. But you'll see the SCOBY is this really thick, rubbery thing. Yeah. Okay. I think we kind of talked about these. Dilly beans is pretty much just the same as pickles. I use the same brine. I put it in there. They go a little bit faster because they're thinner. So 3 or 4 days you can start checking the beans depending on how crisp you want them. But pickles take at least a week, sometimes 2 if the temperatures are a little lower. And it's okay just to, if the color's looking right, if it's cloudy, if it's been a week and a half, you can totally get one out, take a slice off, try it, see if it's done. If not, put it back on the shelf. Cool and dark. You want to keep it in a dark pantry or cupboard or something. You really don't want light on them. And that goes for all of the ferments. And then when they're done, put them in the fridge. Let's talk about milk kefir. Does anyone make milk kefir?
Used to.
Yeah.
I do.
Nice. So milk kefir is super easy, right? It's way easier than yogurt. You don't have to bring things to the right temperature and keep it at the right temperature. Basically, you get your kefir grains, you put it in the jar, you pour milk over it, you wait 24 hours, and you have this beautiful, runny, thick kind of stuff that's perfect for smoothies and salad dressing. I just barely made this other batch. Here's the thing with kefir though, this is another trick that I decided to do, is once the milk is all thickened up, you have to go sift through it and find your kefir grains to move them to your next batch. And I kept losing kefir grains and it was a pain, and you know me, I'm really lazy about this stuff, so I want the fastest way to do it. So the thing that I figured out to do, where are they? There they are. Is I decided to put my kefir grains in a little home. And I bought these little silicone tea bags that you can open up at the bottom. And you just take off the bottom and you put your kefir grains inside. And they've got it's a mesh thing there. And I put that in my jar, as you can see.
Smart girl.
Fill it up with water, and the next day I just take this out.
Fill it up with water?
Milk. Thank you for catching that. Milk, yes. This is milk kefir.
Thought you were magic.
Just move it over, pour the milk in. Super easy. And about every 6 months I'll separate it, share some grains with something, but somebody. Here's what I've noticed. So I love that. It works really well for me. But I have noticed when I've tried to share my grains who are used to living in the little house with people who don't have a silicone bag, that the grains they don't adjust to being out in the open very well. So if you want grains from me, I will share them in a bag because
They're alive, aren't they?
is your kefir still doing okay?
So good.
Okay,
She
good.
shared me a little silicone bag, and my milk kefir is lovely.
Good, yeah.
Doesn't the kefir expand?
Yeah, it starts growing in
It
there.
kind of fills up
But you know what? With the free grains, they grow pretty big. Like you can get a clump of grains like this big. Is that how yours are? And they don't grow, they don't proliferate as much in their little home. But they still do a
And
really
they
great
do the
job.
job.
They do the job. So
So
and
you
then
use the same grains for 6 months? You just keep putting new
yeah,
milk?
Where do
you
you
just
get
move
kefir
them
beans?
to a new jar, pour milk in.
The website.
24 hours, you've got your kefir. It's the easiest fermentation. If you want to start with something, start with that. It's like,
We're gonna be able to taste it, right? I've never tasted it.
yes, I brought some spoons and so we can taste some of these things. I've got some toothpicks. You can totally
So
do some
here's my
tasting.
question. I was into the water kefir and milk kefir probably 20 years ago.
Okay,
And a lot of life has happened since then.
Right.
So it all kind of got set by the wayside.
yes.
And I'm trying to remember, like, you've got your little jar of the kefir there. Do you just drink that straight, or do you like blend it up into like
She
to
said smoothies.
to flavor it? So if you're gonna flavor it into say raspberry kefir or something, would
Yes.
you so that's what I'm asking.
This plain is an acquired taste. Those of you who haven't tried it before and want to taste it, be prepared for a very sour
Yeah.
product. Yogurt is very mild compared to kefir. So yes, you can make smoothies with it and add some fruit or whatever. I use it as the base for mine, and then my protein powder has some stevia and flavoring in it. So
Okay, so that's
that
what I said. So
balances
it's the
it.
base like you would for milk or
Right.
almond milk or coconut milk or whatever.
do you know what else this works really well for? Buttermilk in a recipe. So it's got that sourness. It activates the recipe like the acid in the buttermilk. And sometimes it's a little thick. So for example, in my waffles, I like to use about 2 cups of buttermilk in my waffles, but I use 1.5 cups of kefir, add another 1/2 cup of water to make it the right consistency of more milk. But it makes a great buttermilk for baking. I love to bake with it. The other thing that it makes really well, and if you give me your email, I will email you that recipe because I didn't print it out, is ranch dressing. It makes amazing ranch dressing. You mix it with a little bit of mayonnaise and some kefir and your spices, and it makes amazing ranch dressing. So that's another way to get picky kids to eat a fermented food is make ranch dressing with it. Yes.
Well, my sister-in-law had this, so I got some from her.
Yeah.
And she just drinks a little bit in the morning, a little bit at night, and I've been doing that. And it is strong, but I can handle. I have a little juice cup,
Yeah.
and
Just like
it's
a
kind of
fourth of a
helped
cup
my
or something.
my stomach issues
Good,
quite a
yes.
bit. So I
Good.
think I've been doing.
I'm
a few
sure it
things,
has.
but yeah.
That's the beautiful thing about fermented foods. If you're doing it for the health benefits, both the acid and the probiotics, 1 tablespoon of any of these will give you billions of friendly bacteria. So you don't have to eat large amounts to get the benefits. You really can. And so, for example, with the kefir, sometimes with my kids, they don't want to eat the whole thing. So I'll just put a spoonful in something else that they're eating and stir it in, some cottage cheese or some vanilla yogurt or something, and they can't taste it and they're getting the benefits. I drink it by the cupful in my smoothies, but that's a really good point. You don't need a lot to get the benefits.
Does your dad do this too?
He enjoys what his wife does for him.
That's what I mean, he does eat this stuff.
Yeah, because my mom makes it. Okay, last one is kombucha, and you might want to, if you want to come up and look at the SCOBY, maybe at the end when we're doing samples and stuff. So a SCOBY is, let's see if I can remember. The S is symbiotic, the C is colony. I can't remember the other layers. It's like bacteria and fungus, and it's just its own really unique thing. This rubbery thing, think of it as an apartment complex for beneficial bacteria, yeasts, and that's what the Y is, yeast, and fungus. And they just create this little colony, and they eat sugar and tea, and they turn it into this whole new drink that's called kombucha, and it fights cancer and keeps your pH balanced and all kinds of beneficial things. The story goes that it was first discovered and kind of brought to the world from Russia, that it's a traditional drink in Russia. I bet the Middle East has their version as well. And in the Chernobyl area, they found that the people who were making and drinking their own kombucha regularly were not as badly affected by the nuclear disaster that was at Chernobyl. So the scientists who kind of researched that and studied them are the ones who were like, oh, we should look into this. And how many years later, now it's a mainstream thing that you can buy in the grocery store. So if you look on your recipe, you do have to get a SCOBY, and I was able to split this off a little bit, and I've got 2 bags if anyone is feeling brave and wants to start doing kombucha. You do need a gallon jar. You can buy these kombucha jars, and honestly, for a long time, I did not make kombucha because I didn't have a kombucha jar. So the theory is the SCOBY can stay on the top, and then you can drain the kombucha from the bottom. That's why they make these. But here's the thing. Anywhere the SCOBY has access to oxygen, it grows. And guess where oxygen gets in? So I'd have my SCOBY growing on top, but then a little SCOBY would start growing inside the nozzle, and after a few weeks, it would get clogged up and you couldn't use it anymore. And so that's why a simple old gallon jar and the ladle, where you just kind of push down the SCOBY and ladle it out, is what works better for me. But if anyone wants a jar and wants to try it that way, you're welcome to take this one home. Now that I've told you why you don't want it, you're still welcome to try it. Yes, and it does use a mix of teas, and I like this brand, the Solstice Tea Traders. There's a couple of different ones, but this one has a lot of herbal teas, and it does have a little bit of green tea in it.
But it's all eaten up, right?
Yes, remember that the sugar that's in it, the tea that's in it, we're not drinking that. The SCOBY is taking that and eating it and processing it and creating a totally different product at the end.
So it's not like there's different flavors of tea because you're not getting that flavor anyway.
Well, different flavors, there are different mixes, and I have noticed that it does change the flavor a little bit, depending on what tea you're feeding it. Oh, I really like one that has a lot of rooibos in it and some of these other herbs. I don't know that I can read that with my glasses. Yeah, this has 50% rooibos, and then it's got a mix of other ones as well. So it needs sugar, and it needs a blend of teas, and water, and that's all it needs. And then if you want to, you can add some
organic sugar.
Yes, but that's just because I don't like GMO sugar. And if I'm going to feed it the good stuff, right? So I do like the organic unrefined sugar. But it doesn't like brown sugar. It doesn't like coconut sugar. It really needs a white sugar. It can be like a turbinado sugar or unrefined, but don't try doing brown sugar or some other fancy sugar.
So I have a question. Years ago, I don't think I ever got into the kombucha, but I had water kefir grains.
Yeah.
And it seems like when I took the class or wherever I learned it, they said that you could flavor it different ways. So you could like do pear or cranberry or ginger or whatever. Do you do that with a kombucha?
Uh-huh.
And at what point would you just like You put it on the bottom, and it.
No, so
So
that's
how-
a really
I
great
can't,
thing.
I can't remember
yes.
how I did it.
So what you do is, it takes about 2 weeks for it to digest all the sugar in the tea and transform it to kombucha. So after 2 weeks, when you're ready to switch it out, then I ladle it into jars, and I just saved some store-bought kombucha bottles and use those. And so I'll ladle it in there, but I'll leave, you just ladle it to about the top of the jar, you know, right where the curve is. And you put kombucha up to that point, and then you fill the rest with juice or whatever else you want. But any of those things that you add, you do it in a second ferment. So you let the kombucha brew all by itself, and then if you want to add flavorings, you do that in the individual bottles.
Okay, so here it says step 3, fill 3/4 full to leave room for juice, then you top off with juice.
Yep.
That's after some time for it to ferment.
That's after it's already done, after your kombucha
Okay, 'cause
is
this
done.
is like put everything
and you're
together,
moving it.
and yeah, it doesn't say when to stop and let it sit to ferment.
Yes,
It says-
so
yeah, no,
the
it says step
instructions
5.
might be
store.
tricky to
Yeah.
follow. So really what you're doing when you're following the instructions is you're doing 2 things. You're moving the kombucha that's already done into its little jars, and you're adding whatever flavors you want to it. At the same time, you're making the new batch of tea and sugar to
move the
replace
SCOBY.
it with and start it out. If my instructions are crazy,
Well, no, it just says top off with the juice, and then you store for 4 or 5 days.
yeah,
second
but that's
fermentation,
after you've
so-
ladled it in. So it says ladle it into your jars. So first you're gonna make your tea. So
So there's not a waiting period after the tea and sugar before you add the juice.
yes,
It
you're
doesn't say
adding the
anything
juice
about
2 weeks after.
I don't think there's 2 weeks in
it.
here.
It doesn't say 2 weeks anywhere.
Right down here, top with a bit. So after you feed it, you're putting it in a jar for 2 weeks.
Oh, I see, we're not there where we're,
So the easiest way to make sense of the instructions is the instructions start when this has already been sitting in the cupboard for 2 weeks, and it's time to switch it out with a new set of water, sugar, and tea when it's done. Does that make sense?
okay, so under ingredients, the 5th thing says juice and it tells, but that isn't put in until after the kombucha is done.
Right.
And you put it in these other little jars,
Yep.
and then you put that juice in, which I don't think is quite said there. And then you leave that for about how long until it's?
Yep, so step number 5. After you put the juice in, you screw on the lids really tightly, and then you put those in the cupboard for
Oh,
another
4
4
or
or
5
5 days. And the juice, it'll digest the sugars in the juice and make
Gotcha.
it a little fizzy or carbonated.
So maybe after step 2, put in a cool place for 2 weeks, cause I don't see, you know,
Well, the tricky thing is you have to
you have to let this.
empty this before you can fill it up and put it in. So you have to empty it, put it in jars, set the
Oh.
jars aside, and then you have to fill this up and put it in your cupboard for 2 weeks.
Okay,
How old is your SCOBY?
Mine is, I've only been doing this about a year, I'd say. So it's not super,
does it get a lot thicker and bigger?
uh-huh.
And that's
Yeah.
when you chop it off and give it to people?
Well, it's in layers, so
Hmm.
I peeled off 2 layers.
But if you peel off a layer, it has everything else, that
Yeah,
it has everything in it.
yep.
Huh.
So, yeah, and you'll wanna do that every 6 months or so.
Do you ever put any of this in your garden to enrich your soil?
Yes, it would make great compost. You could definitely, I don't know that I do it on purpose, but for example, if you had a bunch of brine left over, you could put it in. You have to be careful though, because it is pretty salty. You don't want to salt your soil too much. But in a compost, it would be fine in a compost. Yeah,
Do you ever feel the top of your lid as it's bulging with the carbonation that is being created with the fermentation
So that's why we either use these special lids that are spring loaded that naturally let the gas release, or you don't screw your lid on tightly. So you either keep your lid loose or you have a specific fermentation lid that lets gas escape. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I do it a little bit differently.
Okay, what do you do?
So I take like for example, Costco has, or whoever has, kombucha, which is natural, not carbonated, and it already has the SCOBY in it. It has the nutrients to ferment. So I just take and empty out a couple of the bottles and put it in the bottom fourth of the bottle, and then I put my fruit in, put the water in there. The water needs to be the same temperature as, not refrigerated, and then I just throw it in a 80-degree little oven that I've got, and when the lids are bulged like that, then I know that it has a lot of carbonation.
All right, yeah, there you go. Yeah, and you can, if you don't want to use fruit juice, you can put fresh fruits and other things in there as well. When I do again, the SCOBY will grow wherever it has oxygen. So when I do the second ferment, where it's in my little jars, a little tiny SCOBY film will form over the next few days. I just drink it, but my husband and kids, they like to pour it through a strainer. So just be aware that there will be a little rubbery glob in your kombucha if you do a second ferment.
So how do you time this just right? So say you've got like a trip coming up and you're like, oops, and then you're gone for a week or 2 weeks
Call
or
Audrey,
something.
never babysit.
Do you come home and find that it's exploded, or you know what I mean, or just gone bad?
It
and
hasn't
like, oops,
it hasn't
okay.
exploded on me, but it does get extra sour.
Okay.
There's been times when I've left my kefir, and it's come back and it's just extra sour, or I've let my kombucha go an extra week and it's more vinegary than kombucha.
Okay.
Now, your milk kefir, you can, if you're gonna be gone more than 3 days, just put fresh milk on it and stick it in the fridge.
Okay.
When you get back, it will take more like 2 or 3 days to start thickening things
To recover.
when it's been cold. And same thing, if I give you a start tonight, you can expect it to last to take about 3 days before it thickens the milk, just because it's been disrupted. So
And raw milk is preferred versus
yeah,
homogenized.
definitely likes that the best, and it also likes the good cream as well. So whole milk, but you can get it used to other milks. You just have to slowly change over.
We have the goat farm, plus we have
Yeah, you can make goat milk kefir. You
Yeah.
just have to kind of.
Rubber Straight always made it from goat milk.
There you go.
Hmm.
Yes.
Temperature is the critical factor here. So if you're going on a vacation and that, just put it in the fridge, and it will not grow as fast. And then when you pull it back out, then it will start growing.
It kind of pauses the process a little
Yes.
Yeah. Exactly. If you remember, sometimes you're like, oh, I'm on vacation.
bit. That would be me, and I'd be like,
Your alarm
oops.
goes off on your phone. Time to feed the kombucha. But you're right. If you think about it ahead, just put it in the fridge and it will slow it down and you can rehabilitate it later. All right. I think what we should do is do some tasting, unless you guys have some other questions that I haven't
So is
answered.
kombucha just a drink?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And all of these have a little bit different strains in them, right? And honestly, as long as they're healthy and not disease causing, the more variety, the better. And so that's kind of what all of these things give you is,
I did read that
Variety.
even, so you start sauerkraut and 4 days later you're tasting it, and a couple days later you're tasting it, and that is 2 different probiotics too, and so those change
Mhm.
as it goes. So,
yeah, it's definitely, an interesting living science thing. What am I looking for? Oh, yeah. So don't take these as the perfect specimens. Let me cut up my Henson spoon. This one's pretty. I just barely changed this one over, so we're not gonna try the kombucha. So you just do it individually.
So I take these bottles.